Recording in progress.
All right. Again, good morning. Welcome. So my name is Samantha Jackson. I am one of the career readiness consultants here at Kent ISD, and I'm joined by Catherine Goldberg, who is another career readiness consultant. So just a quick introduction, if you want to throw this in the chat, you can throw in your name, pronouns, your role, school, grade level you work with, just so we can kind of get a sense of who is in the room here. Go ahead and throw that in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to throw up two polls. The first poll, we've been doing these would you rather. So would you rather be a healthcare educator shaping the future generation of medical professionals, or a healthcare advocate working to improve policies and access to quality care? I'm going to throw up that poll here. And then I think after you do the first question, it'll take you right into the second, which is, again, just trying to get a sense of who's in the room, which most accurately depicts the students you work with. So are you an elementary, middle, high, K-8, K-12, or are you an employer friend? Again, go ahead and throw that information into the chat so we can see who's here too. All right, so we got a pretty even split here. I'm going to share the results so you can see. So about 50, a little under 50% for educator, a little over 50% for advocate, and a pretty even split here for elementary versus high school, and then our employer partners. So awesome. Welcome, everyone, to that show. I don't know.
I didn't. Okay.
All right, so for those who aren't familiar with our department at the ISD, so we are in the College and Career Readiness Department. We have 4 consultants who work with school districts in Kent County. And so each of us has assigned districts, and our goal is to kind of create a K through 12 plan for career readiness to really make sure that our students are leaving high school with an informed plan for their post-secondary life. Along with that, so in addition to working directly with schools, we also provide a lot of professional development like this. We help with educational development plans. We help connect schools with employers. So if you're looking at things like industry tours, bringing in guest speakers, career fairs, bringing people into classrooms, things like that. And then also helping to develop or curate career readiness resources.
All right. There we go. So hi, everybody. I am Catherine Goldberg. And just to give you a little bit of an overview about the Career Readiness Network, some of you have been with us since the beginning. Some of you are joining us today. We welcome you. We held some in-person meetings earlier this fall. We are now in our virtual series of meetings this winter to try to expand reach to more folks, but also recognize winter in West Michigan can be brutal for travel. And then we will come back together in person in April and May. So if this is one of your first time joining us and you would love to actually meet in person with some folks and have some of those more natural conversations, there will be opportunities for those coming up as well. And our sort of structure for these sessions is at some point we will have a discussion by grade level so that you can connect with peers who are working with similar age students. And then the topics. So the topics are flexible in that Samantha and I want to make sure that we are really meeting the current needs of school counselors, of educators, teachers across Kent County in particular, given that's where we are. So you can see where we have been, and then where we are going in January is we'll be teaching a session on Holland's codes and how you can teach that to students interactively. So to avoid the stand and deliver of here's what the R stands for in Holland's codes. And then as you can see, February, March, and May are open. So if you are with us today and have some great ideas or some like burning desires to learn about something, let us know. We have flexibility there. Have no fear. If we get no input from the audience, Samantha and I still will come up with a bank of relevant topics. But as always, the strength of these sessions is by our participants. And then just some important framing. One mindset that is not here yet, I just want to name, is normally we start our sessions with an opportunity to connect with other folks just to feel grounded. Today, given our panelists and our employer partners who are here with us, we want to honor their time. So we won't have that, but take 5 seconds, catch your breath, feel your feet on the ground, know that you're in a good place. But the mindsets that we've structured these conversations is really inquiry based. So we know that we learn by asking questions, exploring and unpacking assumptions, and that's the frame that we bring to these. We also know that there is no simple answer, right? Learning is not a straight line. It can be messy, it can be cyclical. And we know that there's many great ways to approach that work. So anything that we're talking through today or in future or past sessions is one idea. And then we know that everyone will also implement it with their best ideas as well. And then problem solving and action oriented. You are educators, your time is precious. We know you have given up a lot to be here. So our work here, our hope for it is to have an immediate connection and application. If there is anything we can do to make that better, please let us know. And then if there are any particular mindsets that you would like to have as you head through today's session, you can drop them in the chat. I think just given that we have panelists here from multiple employers across West Michigan, I want to just add in a spirit of gratitude and appreciation for folks who are giving up their time as well with us today. All right. The additional thing I want to talk about is we have a Padlet. If you're not familiar with it, it's a virtual whiteboard, for lack of better terms, but it's a place for resources. So you will see if you click the link that Samantha's going to drop in the chat, you'll be able to see sort of the categories where you can contribute. You can introduce yourself. And then one thing I want to show on it is there are resources there as well. So 2 resources relevant to today's conversation. You will see the West Michigan Works Healthcare Support Career Guide. Page 3 has a great visual that is directly relevant to what we're talking about today, which is that you can see different careers within healthcare, their wage ranges, and then the rest of the packet has information about training pathways. And then the other one I wanted to make sure to mention because it has an upcoming deadline. If you are working with high school students, the West Michigan Healthcare Careers Pipeline Program, that flyer is also linked on our Padlet, and it sounds like an amazing opportunity for students who are interested in healthcare careers to be able to have mentorship and connection and have some in-person and virtual opportunities. All right. So that brings me to today's agenda. We've done our welcoming. I'm about to head into some framing. We will have our panel discussion roughly 8:15 to 9:15. Then we will have an opportunity for small group debrief and discussion. Then Samantha will lead us through an empathy map activity related to today's panel and discussion, and then we will close out. Anything you want to add here? Okay. I'm going to take my own advice and slow down. So the framing for today's panel, just to give you some context here, why did we choose healthcare careers today? Number one is, as an industry group, healthcare has many high demand, high wage careers. So we see it in the data. We also hear it from employers everywhere we go. They say, like, we are really looking for employees, but employees who are also trained across various pathways. So thinking about your audience, as educators, you may have students who want to go to four-year college, you may have students who want to do an apprenticeship, trade, or two-year program, and you may have students who are like, hey, I want to get into the field of work. And we know that the healthcare career has so many opportunities that are both in high demand and high wage across all educational pathways. And also the educational pathways and credentials are super important in the healthcare field. And we know that 9 through 12, and then therefore K through 8 leading into 9 through 12, educational planning can have a big impact. So we wanted to get this information out front to everybody. If you've been in the field, you probably know that you have consistent, strong interest from students and their families about careers in healthcare. And then the data also tells us that it's going to be the fastest growing industry group in the next 5 years, both in West Michigan and if you think about students who may move across the state, just within the state as a whole. And then framing for sort of how we are approaching today's, the idea is that we are spelling out the nuances between different but related roles to expand awareness of the variety and support students in finding the best fit role. And so we also thought about it from the lens of like, when we have a student in front of us who may have a mismatch between career aspirations and their strengths or their interests, their performance, or their financial ability to attend a 4-year or graduate school, we want to make sure that we have a deep bank of ideas and of other opportunities to provide to them, because it always sounds better to say like, have you considered all of these options versus just needing to stay in the like, what my original goal was might not be realistic or might not be the path I can take at this moment in time. So the framing for today's conversation is really that comparing and contrasting. So the Venn diagram came up a lot, and I wanted to have this visual here as a parallel. As educators, we may instinctively know the differences between a school counselor, a school social worker, a school psychologist, and then how a teacher and administrator also can overlap with those. And so we wanted to bring sort of that lens of what might be instinctual for you as an educator and knowing the roles within education, then into the healthcare profession. Anything I should clarify there? No. Okay. Sometimes I get these ideas and Samantha looks at me and she's like, okay, Catherine. So I always check in with somebody else as well. So the idea here is to hear from folks who are in related but not identical roles. And we're going to do that across 3 settings. As you listen to today's panel, just want you to consider, what do you think, feel, or say, or do when students express an interest in a career in healthcare? How are your mindsets shifting or expanding? What are you learning that you may want or feel a need to share back to your school community? So how we are going to do this. This is a wheel or like a clock. We're going to go clockwise. So I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. We will talk then within groups of their settings, not because the setting is the defining factor, but because the folks coming from the settings have the 2 roles that are related and have that overlap. And we are going to kick off with our Orthopedic Associates of Michigan folks who are here. We will move into Pine Rest, and then we will conclude with the Center for Physical Rehabilitation folks that are joining us. Then we will have time for open discussion and questions across all of the panelists. So we'll sort of do it within one setting, move to the next, but there will be open time at the end. Okay. So without further ado, I need to just help my screen for 1 second so I can facilitate this conversation a little better. All right. I am going to invite Andrew and Eric to come off mute. And if you could introduce yourselves, names, preferred pronouns, the title of your current role, and then if you could just paint a picture for our educators here, what kind of student were you in high school?
Good. I'll start with, yeah, so my name is Andrew Seaford, go by he, him. I'm a registered nurse and a certified surgical technologist. What kind of student was I in high school? I was a student who never had to study, but I got decent grades and I should have studied. I feel like if I would have studied as much as I did in college, I would have been a valedictorian. Yeah, so.
I am Eric Malloy. I am he, him. I am sterile processing team lead. I was an okay student, but I was an athlete, so I had like all the extra help, the study tables and the stuff like that, that I always had decent grades.
Great. I like to kick us off with that, just especially if you're ever in a room with students, you can see some students start to light up when they're like, oh, okay, I can be a successful human regardless of where I am right now, right? All right. So just to paint the picture about your specific roles, I will ask, you guys can answer these questions either together or separately, whatever feels right for the two of you. But let's pretend it's last Thursday. Your day has started. What time is it? Where are you? What does it sound like? What does it look like? And maybe like what's one of the first projects or tasks or activities you started on a typical Thursday?
So it's Thursday. I get to work about 5 to 7. So it's 7 a.m. and we walk in, we get changed in all of our outfits. I wore this nice outfit and I immediately changed into scrubs.
Yep.
There was no point in wearing nice clothes to work, but I did anyways. And at 7 a.m., all of our operating rooms are completely tiled from head to toe pretty much. And it's just dead quiet. And all of a sudden the machines start turning on, beep, beep, all these beeping start. And then all of a sudden it's this kind of a dull roar. Clean the rooms and we get started for our first procedures.
Yeah, same. I get here around a few minutes before 7. I turn on what we call our boilers to create steam for our sterilizers. Just like he said, in 5 minutes, it goes from dead silence to you hear machines whistling and stuff beeping, letting us know that our day is about to get started. After that, my day, I would prepare and get every instrument they would need for surgery together and ready for them to complete the day.
Thank you for drawing that visual, or it's not a visual, the auditory of the silence into the noise. That's a really good way to do that. And then I'm curious if both of you could talk about what was your entry into the field? How did you learn about your career field? What kind of training did you do? And then if there are new or different training routes that you've learned of, if you could share those as well.
My schooling started, I graduated high school in 2008. And I always make this analogy that a recession is when your neighbor loses his job and a depression is when your parents lose their jobs. And that's kind of what I encountered. So my one thing was I always enjoyed like helping people. Sometimes that could mean sales, but every time I like help somebody find something, or when I was working at a golf course and, oh, I don't know where this is at, I need help. And I got like a gratification from that. So when I took my test in high school of like what makes you happy, it was like service, helping people. And then nursing was like, you 100% are going to get a job. That's true in 2008, true in 2023, and it'll be true in 2033. So that was one thing that really made a difference for me of choosing a career field where I wasn't really in fear of losing my job. I always wanted a stable income, just so I wouldn't have to really experience that financial burden for me and my family in the future. So I became a surgical tech. I was on a wait list for the nursing program for 1 year. So I worked in surgery and I was like, oh, I got to do this. So I went back to school finished my nursing career, and I've been doing that since 2011. So 12 years.
Yeah, I think just a couple things I want to put in, just like interject right there. I think that was really interesting is the idea of like, what's the role you could be in while you're waiting on a wait list or while you're waiting to get into a program. That seemed really important to me. And then also that idea of like, I want to help people, right? So some of the inspiration behind today's panel was also the like, you have the student who's like, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. And we just want to expand that there are so many additional opportunities for how you could enter into a field and help people as well. So, yeah. All right, Eric, sorry, I interjected.
Oh, no worries. I kind of heard about this job through a peer of mine, family friend. I was an athlete. I was going to GRCC playing football at the time. I was going to become a young parent. And, when you become a young parent, you need money versus the frills of life in it. So I had to figure out what I was going to do. It was actually my son's first birthday party, and like 2 family friends were there, and they were working together inside of this field. So like at this birthday party, I kind of asked all my questions, see who I needed to talk to, where did I go apply for the job, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, that power of those social networks and those connections.
What you know is who you know, right?
Yep. So I think both of you have painted a picture of what you are each doing in a given day. but I'm wondering if you could talk about like, what are some other roles either within your center or within your career field more generally, that people in your role would interact with?
Here we have nurses and techs, like Andrew mentioned before. We have prep and PACU, where the patients come in and they get prepped for surgery, and also after surgery they're getting taken care of. We have a business office where we have medical billing and coding. What else?
What additional roles are here? Yeah. We have everything from administration to more clinical preoperative care, and then what I would consider what we call intraoperative care, and then post anesthesia care. Medical billing, coding, and then there's an entire different department that's not on our campus, but there's physical rehab, all of our offices to get them kind of ready for surgery or follow up for surgery or plan surgery, physical therapy. There's an entire department for people fitting for orthotics, so that's like anything like you need a boot or a sling for after your surgery. So there's an entire department for that.
Yeah. Just want to, for our participants, we just want to throw as many roles out there just for you. Like if you hear one there, you're like, wow, I didn't know anything about that. You could jot it down, Google it later. So Andrew and Eric, not asking you to be the experts on all of those fields, but it's just helpful when you're in it to be able to give the names of other roles to be curious or explore about. So I am wondering if you could talk about, are there other settings for the roles that you're in right now? So for example, I was listening to a career panel for a nurse, and she had heard early in her career, if you're struggling with your current role, don't quit the field of nursing, but maybe look for a different setting or a different age group or something like that. So I'm wondering if you could talk about what other kinds of settings besides the OAM Surgery Center are there for surgical techs. I think we know nursing, but you can share a little bit there, and then sterile processing as well.
Yeah, that's an incredible amount of time that I can go into it, but nursing is so vast. It's quite incredible. And the nice part about it is that almost every kind of situation that has when you go to nursing school, they give you quite a base of education that's there. You can't learn everything when you go to school, and you're not going to know everything. It's actually a bad idea to think you know everything. But working in surgery is a completely different field than working in maybe a center that focuses on dialysis or a center that works on the treatment of cancer. I can leave today in surgery and I can go there and to another facility, and they would completely pretty much train you on that new subject matter. And that's the kind of the expectation. Some other notable fields are, you could work for I think it's Gift of Life, where somebody has had an accident and they are an organ donor, and you get on a jet and you fly to that area, and then you harvest the organs and then you fly back. I mean, that's just like a totally different field that's how vast it could be. You could work as a nurse practitioner, you could be prescribing medications and diagnosing patients. Surgery is just one aspect of being floor nursing, intensive care unit, emergency room.
There's a lot.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I would just compare ours from working inside of a hospital to kind of working at the surgery center. At the hospital, you get everything. You get every specialty. You have to clean everything, every urology and pathology and eyes and plastics and all these different specialties. But when you come to a surgery center, it's more specialty specific. Like our surgery center only does orthopedics. So my job, it kind of narrows it down and simplifies it for us to kind of just take care and specialize on these orthopedic instruments versus having to specialize on everything.
That's a really good point. Thinking about students who might be the type that do really well with like a smaller frame, some things for them to think about what their ultimate location is versus a student who may be indecisive and want to explore all of them before they make that decision. Yep. And as I'm talking, I also want to just acknowledge for our educators in the room, this is not all only on your shoulders, right? The goal for today's conversation is just to help you understand the scope of it. But we know that families play a critical role, and extended families, however that's defined. We also know that their educational institutions play a really important role in helping students determine their best fit along the way. So I just want to put that disclaimer in there. But just really helpful things to think about. Are there common misconceptions about either of your fields that you would like folks to know about? So I think the example I often give as a trained school counselor is high school students might say, I'm really good at giving my friend advice, so I want to be a therapist. When in reality, the best therapists are typically not that directive, and you're actually not giving a lot of advice. So for both of your fields, are there misconceptions or things that you want to make sure students know or hear of before they consider it?
I think just on my basis of when I first entered nursing, it was such it was a female driven practice, and now it has like become such a equal. There's multiple males that are nurses, and I didn't really want to go in the field because I was like, I just don't know. This is kind of like nursing has always been a kind of female dominated career field versus, yeah, I just don't see it that way anymore. And I think that's kind of definitely I think if you go really in any hospital, I don't think it really sways one way or another. You know, it's kind of, I wouldn't say equal, but it's definitely leveling off.
I would say my misconception is that because we clean and we're cleaning all the dirty instruments, is that it's just stuff, just buckets of blood everywhere, and it's just, you can't handle it. It's not as bad as you were seeing. Like, it's just like doing the dishes. Like, you put the ugly stuff in the dishwater and it comes off, same difference.
Oh, one more was, I gotta get it out before I forget about it, but was that nursing, all you do is like wipe butts all day long. That was the big thing. I haven't wiped a butt in 12 years. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I wipe my kids' butts. But that's,
right. I appreciate the transparency there. Eric, I realize I have a question that I don't know at all. Are you actually in the room for surgery, or are you outside of the room?
No, I'm not. I'm outside of the room. We have our own little separate department where we're kind of preparing other trays for other surgeries.
Yep. And I asked that partially because I'm curious, partially because if you have a student who really likes the idea of healthcare, but is like, I can't actually be in the surgery with the doctor, that's a helpful piece of information to realize, like, you're dealing with the effects of it, but I imagine it's a different setting in terms of that.
My job kind of goes all the way up to the surgery, like all the way up until they say scalpel and I'm out of there.
Yeah. Great. And then I'm curious if you could both talk about what kind of advances or changes or directions do you see the field going in the next few years? For example, are there particular careers, either your own or related, where you're like, wow, I can see that there's going to be a huge need for that in the future?
I got to go back one little bit about, like, I can't do healthcare because I just don't like, maybe I don't like blood or something. We have it's a funny story. One of our orthopedic surgeons, he poked himself with a dirty needle by accident, and so we had to draw his blood, and we drew his blood, and we found out that he would pass out from seeing his own blood, and he's an orthopedic surgeon. So it's just kind of maybe that is something to think about, I guess, is maybe get in there and see what you like, or maybe watch a few YouTube videos. You might actually like it. But yeah, it's kind of funny. He does major does some of our biggest orthopedic surgeries we do here, but he cannot stand a needle. He'll pass out if he gets a needle in him. So
yeah.
So what the question? What do we see in the future for healthcare? Is that what
growth?
Growth, yeah, it's obviously exponential. The scope of field is definitely going up. Like, registered nurses are giving more responsibilities in a good way, more autonomy in the healthcare field. That's definitely what I see in the future.
Yeah.
So for me, for my position, so we work at a small center right now, 4 OR rooms. We're going to grow. Our center is going to grow. Our department is going to grow. So it's always room for expansion. There'll be room for leadership roles and everything. So it's a slow grind, but it's better. Slow process better than no progress.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Great. And then the last question, before we move to other panelists, and we'll come back to you at the end for some open questions. But what makes your career a great career?
I think what makes my career a great career is that it's always evolving. Like for instance, we've changed how we do, and it's all science driven. It's not really like somebody just comes up with a random way, but we've changed the way we've done ACLs probably 5 times in the past 3 years. So it's always changed. It's never like this mundane boringness. And one thing I love about my career field is like when we have friends over, they're like, "What do you do for a living?" I was like, "Oh, I work in surgery," and it's like a very interesting thing that happens. And you're like going to, like, "What's the craziest thing you ever see?" You know, I was just like, "Oh, okay." And then versus like a different department where it's like, you know, and I always say I have to preface that I'm not sorry to any accountants, but it's like, "What did you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I worked in spreadsheets," and it's like, next conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I also get like a gratification out of it. Gratification about like what I'm doing is important. We see direct positive outcomes on patients on a daily basis. You know,
I would say that I enjoy my job. It's a stepping stone. So I worked in a hospital where you could work any array of shifts. You could work 7 to 3:30, 3 to 11:30, or 11 to 7:30. And when it's like graduation, when I graduated to the surgery center, it was like a whole new world. There's no weekends, no holidays. That's a beautiful thing. It's more time I can spend with my family. We're also a profit sharing company where we get bonus checks every 3 months. So it's a beautiful thing once you graduate to the surgery center.
Yeah. Ah. There's so much more. I'm at the risk of putting words into everyone's mouth at the end when we talk about our takeaways. I'm just struck by how many dimensions there are to what makes a career a great career, right? So it's both the day-to-day and the small things, but it's also those bigger pictures about how's your schedule determined? Do you have flexibility? Do you get like all of those pieces and parts? So thank you, Andrew and Eric, for kicking us off. I know you may need to head out at some point, so if we run over or anything, please head out whenever you need to. But we will have opportunities to ask Andrew and Eric more questions in the last 15 minutes of our panel. So thank you so much. And I am going to shift us to Tiffany and Allison from Pine Rest. And
good morning. I can't see Allison. Everybody else, a great job sitting in the same room with each other. Allison and I should have thought of that. So sorry about that. That would have been helpful. But Allison and I know each other, so hopefully we'll be able to bounce off each other like Andrew and Eric did. So without interrupting each other too much. But for whatever reason, Allison teams me and she can see me, but I can't see her. So, and I'm a pretty visual person. So hopefully we'll be able to make this work.
I'm gonna pin Allison. Let's see if I pin Allison.
I'm sure if I start talking, maybe you'll see me too.
Oh, I see Allison now. All right.
There you go.
All right, I've got you both pinned. Okay, great. Yes.
I'm Tiffany Ejak. I'm the clinical director for the hospital and residential services at Pine Rest. I've been at Pine Rest for 28 years, but in the field for over 30. And my pronouns are she and her.
Great. I'm Allison Brower. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been working at Pine Rest the last 6.5 years. My role actually primarily is the lead social worker on the child and adolescent unit, on the inpatient unit, and then I also do some outpatient work, seeing people, and then teaching a parenting approach as well, called the Nurtured Heart approach. So doing a lot of different things. And Tiffany is the director of the main thing that I do during the week. So yes, we do know each other.
Okay, great. And then I'm wondering if you could both talk a little bit about what kind of high school student were you?
Well, I think my life mirrored a little bit about Eric and Andrew too. I played sports in high school and college, and in high school, that was my primary goal, to make sure that those games went well and things like that. I played basketball and softball in high school. I played basketball in college. And I think it was Andrew that said that if he had tried as hard in high school as he did in college, his GPA would have been quite a bit higher. Same with me. I tried a lot harder in college. And my thing that I always tell people when they're in school, when they're working on their bachelor's degree or their master's degree, nobody asked me for my transcripts. They just wanted to know that I graduated, right? That I had a certificate or things like that. And I was like, man, don't you want to see these transcripts over there? They're awesome. But when you're in your master's program, you have to have a B or better, or you have to retake the class. So no one really asks you what your GPA is, because they know it has to be at least a 3.5 for you to continue on or to actually graduate in the field. So and that was sports is actually what, looking back on it, got me into the field, because I originally, when I was in high school, thought I wanted to be an attorney. And the reason I thought I wanted to be an attorney was because of the injustice that I saw. I saw it everywhere I looked, pretty much. And the inequality in sports, when I was doing sports, was huge. There was definitely disparities between girls and boys sports in high school and even in college. And then I saw it everywhere else in the classroom and things like that. And I thought the way that maybe I could change, quote unquote, change the world is through being an attorney and fighting for the people in regards to injustice. But then as I got through high school and started into college, I changed directions a little bit, but still actually kind of have that goal and tell people, hey, when I retire, I think I'm going to go back to school and get my law degree. That's a little bit about high school.
Yeah, but I think it's helpful to think about what are the motivations that lead folks into various careers too. So Allison, your turn.
Yeah, I would say that I think people looked at me. I also was an athlete and I had a certain level of confidence. So I think people expected me to be a straight A student. And then it turned out I was just kind of like average B, sometimes C. So that I think then played into how I presented to people. And then I said, I still have to work hard. So I think that then shaped how I kind of transitioned into college too. And but like Tiffany said, definitely once you go into each level and figure out a little bit more of what you want to do, I think your motivation and focus and ability to do well in those classes kind of transforms as well.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask both of you just to provide some insight into your career field and into your roles. The same question from Andrew and Eric. So last Thursday, if you need to go to Friday, it's okay. But last Thursday, your day has started. Where are you? What time is it? Who are you around? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And I'll have Allison kick us off, just then we'll go backwards.
Yeah. Well, just to share kind of about both of the roles that I do, I think during the day, in the inpatient setting in the hospital, at least, we're figuring out who the patients are. And, I'm assigning patients to the other clinicians that I work with. So a team of social workers, about 6 or 7 of us, and all working hard to figure out what our priorities are, because there's always plenty to do, but figuring out what families to call, what patients to see, and what order to do that. So our job actually is quite, it changes each day, but yet you still have to have you have to do certain tasks each day as well. But you can kind of choose how you want to do that. And then in the outpatient setting, really the goal is you're getting your schedule and you're seeing who's next, documenting, and then going to the next person. So each in that way too, it's kind of every moment is a little bit different, but the tasks are very similar.
Yeah. And then Tiffany, are you?
So my role is more of an administrative role now. After all these years, I've done community work, done outpatient. I still do outpatient a half a day a week to make sure that I keep up my own personal clinical skills. That's just a choice of mine. And then also residential work. So flexibility in regards to what time I come sometimes regarding the day, because sometimes I have to stay later for team meetings. They could be 9 to 11 o'clock at night or things like that. But I looked at my schedule for last Thursday, and I had to be here by 8:30 because we're working on a project with another county. It's a crisis stabilization unit and collaboration. So that's one of my big parts of my job is to collaborate with other organizations, to collaborate with other counties, and it will be something that the state of Michigan that's new to the state of Michigan. So collaboration ultimately with Kalamazoo County. I remember that I have to drop my own child off at school beforehand. So sometimes I'm running in pretty quickly before a meeting. And when you say about noises or things like that, it's usually, there's a lot of highs, laughter. You know, it is a nice place to work. People greet each other. And so as you're kind of running in and trying to get to where you're going, that's what I kind of remember about the mornings. You know, you're opening the door and there's people are greeting you. That was like the first 90 minutes. I'm usually pretty back to back all day. That day next was senior huddle once a week. All the directors meet together, go over what their week looked like and what their upcoming week looks like. So did that next. Then I had a recruitment meeting because we need social workers, don't we, Allison? And and so, and it's a field that is literally exploding. And so finding social workers, finding master's level social workers is an ongoing process. So have a recruiting meeting every single week with human resources to discuss how are we going to recruit, who are we going to tap. Also, we actually paid for some of our employees to go back and get their master's degrees. And so kind of waiting for them to graduate, keeping track of them. So we can kind of grow our own as which is necessary. Then I had 3 clinical meetings back to back with different teams. So I call them clinical huddles. One was with Freedom House, one was with Centerpoint. And then we moved into an org chart review, which was an hour long, and then ended with 2 interviews that day.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that was also really helpful about having both of you is being able to show that administrative role that somebody can work their way into and how that compares and contrasts to the more clinical or to the more patient or client focused. And I think that's also really important to just think about a student's or a person's trajectory over their lifetime, right? And I think Eric talked about it a little bit too in the previous one of sort of you work your way up, right? That first year might not be the vision of what you thought the career was ultimately going to land at, but that it's about that sequencing.
Yep. And that's the exciting part too, is all the different things that you can do. And I know that was a previous question, and it is just amazing. All the things that I have done, all the things that you can do with this degree.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the two of you could talk a little bit about this inpatient, outpatient element of it, and sort of what do you see in the day-to-day work of a social worker and how it differs for the inpatient as compared to the outpatient?
Yeah, and I think that inpatient, really the focus, obviously, your skill set is more focused on crisis stabilization. So you're really wanting to make sure this family, this patient that is going through this moment of crisis, how can we get them into stabilization and being successful in the community? Whereas outpatient can be a lot of different levels where you are meeting with them just because they've also gone through a crisis, or they're seeking help in a way that it's for a very specific reason or ongoing mental health issues. So the degree of severity can be a much more in the outpatient setting, whereas in inpatient, there's criteria to be hospitalized. And so the crisis is a lot more apparent. And yeah, I think that's what's interesting too about Pine Rest in the setting, but also social work in general is I think your skill set can be so wide, but also you can really like figure out what is your skill set and really focus in on that and grow that too. Because that's part of my role as well as the lead, like making sure everyone, and a social worker, I think everyone's a leader in some aspect. You're really leading people through taking next steps if they're in that crisis, or taking steps in growing as a person. So I think everyone has leadership qualities that you can find in social work. And if you have people around you that are seeing and calling that out in you, I think then that's where you can grow and have different positions in leadership as well.
Yeah.
And when people think of social work or even Pine Rest, a lot of times they think of hospital and outpatient, right? And we have over 100 beds of residential and social workers working in residential, in crisis, working with people that have developmental disabilities. We also have community case management that we do. We have a street reach program. So quite a large community outreach program, as well as residential, as well as outpatient. And somebody said different settings at different times in your life. And I did not intend on staying at Pine Rest for 28 years, but due to the vast opportunities and various different areas that you can work in, like Allison was saying, you can go and work in outpatient if that's what you need for that part of your life, where you're not gonna, I think Andrew or maybe Eric talked about no weekends or holidays or things like that. That's going to happen in outpatient. That's not going to necessarily happen in the hospital or in the contact center or in residential. You're going to have to work holidays or weekends as a social worker at times. But you won't have to in the outpatient area. So really being able to, you're not pigeonholed into not that there's anything wrong with going to school to be a math teacher, but that's what you're going to be as a math teacher for 9th through 12th grade. And it sounds like in nursing or in social work, you can ebb and flow various different areas, do different things, move around throughout your career.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I know we could keep going forever. I am going to leave us with the last question just so we can get to our third group, and then we can have the open conversation and open dialogue. But in a nutshell, if you had to say it in one sentence, why is your career a great career?
I think for me, the variety and the learning opportunity within social work has kept me wanting to continue being a social worker. So that's the simplest way to say it.
I would agree. And the only thing I will add is you had asked the biggest misconception.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And so I totally agree with Allison's answer. So I believe one of the misconceptions is pay. Social worker, you don't have to go into the field to be a poor people are like, well, we didn't go into the field. And it's like, no, that social workers and the pay for social workers has greatly increased over time. It was a field where it was very, very poorly financially positioned. That is not the case anymore. So just making sure that sometimes people do not want to go into fields because they don't feel like they can financially provide for their families and things like that, which I understand. So I want to make sure that that misconception goes away in regards to social work.
Thank you, Tiffany, for adding that layer to the conversation, for prompting that question as well. And I think that's such an important element to make. So there will be more opportunities where we will ask you to come back on. I'm going to unpin both of you, and then I'm going to pin Angie and Doug. Give me 1 second. So proud of myself for trying new things today, right? Okay. All right. So our third setting, our third duo, we have Angie and Doug from the Center for Physical Rehabilitation. I am wondering if you could introduce yourselves, your name, your current title, pronouns, and then what kind of student were you in as a child, K through 12, high school, if that's the most relevant to talk about.
Oh, thank you. I know I feel like we're on a talk show or something. It's kind of a fun way to start my day. So thanks for having us. I am Angie Schlosser-Bacon. I am a practice liaison, which is kind of a unique role. It's more of the marketing, community liaison, go between our therapists and outside. And I'll get into the details of that a little bit more. My pronouns are she and her. And in high school, I would say I was like a lot of you guys, I was pretty average. I was probably more interested in hanging out and talking to everybody than I was about school. And I don't know if that's changed.
We're still doing well.
That's changed a ton. But I mean, I was a decent student, but I wasn't like, I wasn't the smartest kid by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm Doug Goering. I'm a physical therapist assistant here. As far as my pronouns are he, him. As far as what kind of student I was, yeah, there's not a lot of difference that I'm going to say that hasn't already been spoken. I will say for the people listening, at some point, if you're going to go into a career where you're going to need education after high school, you will just have to learn how to study. I think a lot of us didn't really learn how to study through high school, but then once you get to college, you have to learn how to study. So the people who did well in college learned how to study in high school, and then there was a lot of us that struggled when it came to college because we didn't know how to learn, or we didn't know how to take in more information than what we used to be able to cram for, a couple hours before a test. So, I will give that nugget out there as far as teach yourself how to study. Now, that's a really broad statement, teach yourself how to study, and be like, well, if I could teach myself how to study, I would do it. Now, what worked for me was learning the information and going over it enough to where I could teach it to a fellow classmate or a friend or whoever was sitting next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And by that point, then I was like, now I'll be okay to go on a test. But cramming didn't work. Cramming doesn't work for forever. For however long you can get away with it, great, but it does not last for forever.
Not much into college.
Yeah. Was there anything I missed? As far as your first question, I'm not off to a great start. I don't feel like you asked me one question. I'm like, I don't even know if I answered it right.
What you could not see or hear was my computer absolutely started making the weirdest noises and froze. So you were doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, great.
The other thing I would add.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Samantha. I was just going to add real
No,
fast.
go ahead.
For a lot of people, I think once they get to college and either they are potentially paying for it themselves or they're realizing like, this is really going to be my career or my job, then I think a lot of people, that's part of the maturity and they step up, and then they're like, oh, okay, wow, like this is for real now. Whereas high school, it's kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes, definitely. Okay, sorry, I'm just grounding myself after that absurd experience. Thank you everyone for your patience. Can you both talk about, we've talked that you both went to college or had some college experiences there. Could you talk about what the specific educational pathways are into both of your roles?
Yeah, totally. So in mine, it's kind of a unique position. Not all physical therapy companies would necessarily have a practice liaison. So for us having some business background, some marketing, I also have communication. I would say that actually for me, I feel like the communication piece is the biggest component. But we have people that have more clinical background that I don't have, but I have prior like recruitment background. So there were definitely transferable skills. So because this is a sort of newer position for our company in the last, let's say 10 years, it probably just really depends on the person and their abilities. So it could be a variety of different skill sets. It's not so cut and dry with a practice liaison.
Yeah, but I think one thing, sorry, before Doug, one thing I think I hear in there is that if you're in a clinical role and you sort of start to realize like, hey, I have these other interests, that clinical background can be transferable in other ways.
Yeah.
I'll kind of go into, so we employ a few different types of clinicians here. Excuse me. So I'm a physical therapist assistant. The level of education that was required for that is an associate's degree. So it is 2 years after school. Now, where I'm originally from Chicago, and the field itself, there was a high demand, especially at the time. There still is a high demand, but there wasn't as many schools offering it. So I couldn't get into an associate's program without a bachelor's degree. So it was a very weird thing because they could be so selective.
Yeah.
There is, and I will say the education inside physical therapy field is always kind of evolving. At this point now, there are no more master's based degrees. They're all doctorate based degrees. So you're going to go through 4 years of undergraduate, and then they're going to have about 3.5 years for doctorate level stuff. And now the reason they did that was was to push something. The $5 word for it is direct access. But what that means is that you can walk in right off the street and you can go see a physical therapist. So they moved the level of education up so that the field itself could progress. So that's that's physical therapy. That's PTA and that's PT. We also employ OTs. OTs is very similar. OT stands for occupational therapist. OT is very similar to what physical therapy is. We can kind of delve into what that looks like at a different time, depending on what questions you want asked. And then the other jobs we employ here is athletic training. And athletic training, it has been a bachelor's degree, but then that has kind of moved into a master's degree too. I think you can kind of do both, but again, that is an evolving field. So I don't want to tell somebody this is where it's at, because 2 years from now, that might be a little bit different. So if I would pass along anything, it would be to, do your research as to, what school you want to go to, and then where they're at that time. But our athletic trainers are anywhere from high school sidelines for sports, colleges. We have some that work in an industrial setting or working with the fire department to do injury prevention, that kind of stuff. So that field has kind of exploded as well, as far as the different places you can go depending on what your interest level is.
Yeah. I think I will just say my mind just was like, whoa, when you said the industrial, but when you think about, I imagine in your field, as you're thinking about workplace injuries or repetitive use injuries, that's probably going to the source to try to prevent them from happening, right?
Exactly right. Yep, you couldn't be more.
Great. So what I will just also say right there, my own dispelling of like, okay, you have to be an athlete and you have to want to be an athlete, right? Like there was an example, a non-example of that. That was super helpful. So cool. I think you all have touched a little bit on the education pathways. You've talked about on the other roles that you collaborate with. I think, and then you've talked a little bit about the settings as well. I want to make sure I ask the question, which is, what are some of the misconceptions about the field of physical therapy or about healthcare more broadly that you would like to make sure either an alternate perspective is shown or to provide some non-examples there?
Yeah, one of the things that I do think is important to know is, as Doug was indicating now, I mean, our physical therapists are doctorate level. So it is very similar to all the other healthcare professions, when I think most students are very comfortable and aware of doctors or PAs or maybe nurse practitioners. But they might not realize physical therapist is very comparably or even a little bit more so trained. So it is very much, that's who we work in conjunction with. We're working side by side with different surgeons and different primary care or specialists. They may be referring patients to us. Likewise, we're referring patients to them. We have to stay in constant communication to keep that continuation of care when we have a shared patient. So it's something that I always want to make sure that students are aware. Here's a whole nother avenue of healthcare that develops a different kind of relationship that I think that there's some advantages to, in the sense that when you're a physical therapist or a PTA or an athletic trainer, we develop relationships because our treatment plan or our treatment time with the patient, I mean, it could be 4 years of high school with the same kid, and you know all their ins and outs, and you know their family, you know those details. Just like with our physical therapists, I mean, the average treatment cycle is going to be somewhere between like 8 and 12 weeks. And that's for just that particular injury. And when you see somebody a couple times, a week for that long, you really develop a relationship. You do really get to know not only their, orthopedic or their various, physical situation, but you get to know them as a person. It's a lot of the psychological going on. So I also think that that's really way more complex than most people realize. And the other bonus is it's a field where you really do get to watch people. Like you have to be their coach essentially to get them to get better, but to watch people come in very much discomfort or pain, and then be able to see progress right away without potentially using drugs, or maybe not having to have a surgery, or having a recovery be a successful one and just having so much relief afterwards is awesome. There's not a lot of fields where you get to see people totally transform through their own work and being like walking with them through that whole process.
Yeah, very, very well said, Angie. I will say, I think the misconception out there, especially for me too, when I was, the people who are listening's age, you get exposed to a lot of it based on what you see either on the news or what you see, what Hollywood's putting out there through TV shows or movies or whatever else. And I will say, if I was to take a snapshot of what that is, it's usually some large rehab facility, and you have your heartthrob who's clinging to very long parallel bars and learning how to walk because they got into some accident, even though they're still incredibly muscular and look extremely healthy, but now they have to learn how to walk again. And I will say, like, sure, that setting exists for sure. There's different settings. I go into them a little bit. So the outpatient setting for us is just that. So it is, people will come in and people will go home. These are people that had a really bad sprain. These are people that got a knee replacement. This is people that slipped and fell on the ice. This is somebody who maybe has Parkinson's and they're trying to learn how to get their coordination back a little bit. This is people who have dizziness, vestibular problems, things like that. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But they come into our office and we treat them, and then they go home. That is what outpatient is. Inpatient settings are a little bit different. So those are skilled nursing facilities or rehab facilities where that person might not have the resources at home, or their condition might be a little too extensive, or they need 24/7 care from other licensed healthcare professionals. So they will have a facility on site. You drive there, you either get them from their room, or you go to their room, or they're brought into the gym space and they're treated there, and then they go back. And then there's hospital-based settings. Again, that can be, there's so many different things from there. There's orthopedic hospital-based, so it's the treating right after they've had the surgery, or you can work on a cardiac floor, or you can work in a peds department, or many different settings. And then the other one is home health based. If you're looking for, I don't want to be trapped in a clinic, or I don't want to be trapped in an office all day, home health is for you, because you get to set, I need to see this many people. This is what works for my schedule. I'm going to drive to their houses. I'm going to treat them there. And then I'm going to leave and do whatever else. And if we're talking financials, home health usually pays the best, because you don't have to pay for a gym facility to be in. You don't have to pay to power it. You don't have to pay for those kinds of things. So the money will go directly to the therapist. And then the therapist is also doing the part of, commuting and doing all of that kind of stuff. So, but if you're not into walking into a stranger's home, I get that too. So, there's benefits and drawbacks to all the different things.
Yeah.
And then I will say, one more part of it is, this can be for a bunch of different healthcare fields, but travel PT. So it's working inside one of those fields, but you work there for however long your contract is, and then you move to a different place. And typically these companies will pay for your apartment for that time you work for, and then you have a contract. Typically it pays pretty well because you're going to be there for a little while. You're helping out some company that could not find a therapist on their own, and they were so overwhelmed with the volume of patients that they needed somebody. So it's a great way to see the world, see the United States of like, I want to go to Seattle, I want to go to Detroit, I want to go to Texas. You can go and see the world, and do it through your career field.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing as I heard you talking, Angie, in particular, about sort of that seeing that growth of that person over time, over their healing trajectory. I feel like that is the Venn diagram between even like Andrew and Eric, where you're in the surgical setting and you're in that, you see them maybe for one day or for a shorter period of time, or you see your work come to fruition there. And then when we think about the social work setting, about somebody's growth and development over time, and sort of that the three fields are even a Venn diagram across that spectrum. So it's a great one. Time is never our friend. We've got some folks who are gonna need to drop off at 9:15. I want to open it up for questions, but I do want to, Angie and Doug, I want to give you a chance. What makes yours a great career? And then if folks need to leave, they can leave at 9:15, but we could also extend the question and answer a couple of minutes as well. So,
yeah. Okay. Mine is that I get to work with everybody within our entire company, and then I get to connect them to referral sources or specialists out in the community. So I really am constantly having to learn who specializes in what, who's got openings, who's taking new patients, how long does it take to get one of our patients into these places, and just learning everybody's specialties, as well as I get to do volunteer opportunities within our community and do education, things like this. And so mine is super fun because it's kind of limitless to a degree, and there's all different ways to tie it back together. So I have a really unique position in that regard. And that's what I love about it, is I just get to connect people and figure out how to make connections for people. And I like that component of it a lot.
For sure. Samantha, I'm gonna echo the best part of my career is kind of what you had just spoken about, is the fact that throughout most of healthcare, you see somebody when they have their issue, they're sick or they're hurt or whatever it is, and then you prescribe them something, or you do a surgery, and if you don't see them again, you did it. Like, okay, I guess everything worked out okay. And so the beautiful part about what we get to do is that it's a very relational base. So you're going to see someone when they're in pain, or when they're uncomfortable, whatever it might be, and then you will get to see them for an hour of time, and you maybe get to see them a few times a week over a couple of weeks. As far as the healthcare field goes, a lot of healthcare is you don't get the luxury of spending that much time with people. So it is a very relational based type of healthcare. And you become kind of part of people's lives, and they'll tell you all kinds of stuff. It's not, sometimes you're not expecting it all the time, but you kind of become this very unique sounding board, because, most people will trust you right away. You're not in their inner circle kind of a thing. So they're just like, listen to what happened to me today. And like, know all about their job, their friend, or their family. And so, yeah, it is very much a relational driven field of healthcare, and it's special. And that's what I enjoy. And that's why I do it.
The one other thing I would add to, in watching a PT's scope of practice too, is they treat anywhere from pediatrics to the end of life. And you can pick specialty areas, but it is really cool that you really, in theory, can treat all different things, all different age ranges, and you can have a huge scope of variety in your work.
Yeah, great. Okay. I am going to open it up to our audience. So if you have a question, audience, that you would like to ask, you could either use the raise hand feature, or you could drop your question in the chat. I'm going to switch my view to gallery so I can see if there's any raised hands. But again, there is absolute permission for any panelists who need to leave at 9:15. That's what we communicated. Do not feel guilty if you need to go. But for our audience, if you have questions, you can either use the raise hand or drop them in the chat. What I will ask for one question for panelists, If you are comfortable giving your contact information out for any counselors who'd like to follow up and ask more questions, or educators who are here, if you could give me like a visual thumbs up on your camera. It's okay if you'd prefer to not do that, but if you're good with that, we can share. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so audience, if you have questions, you can do the raise hand and I'll allow you to unmute, or you can drop your questions in the chat. Gonna give it a second for folks to type if they have a question.
Hey, I'll just ask a general question. I'm a school counselor. Obviously, health careers are very popular among students, but they seem to be missing a little bit of that reality piece. And so, what would you recommend for students in the healthcare industry who maybe are not great at science? They seem to forget there's a lot of science in a lot of healthcare careers.
I think it's important that they understand that that is going to be a foundational, like,
I agree.
right? But I think there's also a lot of kids, like we were even talking about, we weren't necessarily any of us great students. And I didn't love science in high school at all, even though my favorite teacher in high school was my science teacher. I just wasn't like mature enough to learn science. And then I got to college, and all of a sudden science like started to click for me, and it got a lot more interesting. So I know it's like hard to give them advice on that, but it will be, for most positions, something needed. But like with mine, like to do more of a marketing or sales type of role, you may not have to have that clinical knowledge. It kind of depends.
Yeah, I'll piggyback that really quickly and then turn over to everyone else's input. So I will say you're right. You do need to know the science to get to the job. I will say once you're in your job, things are much more, I would say things are much more practical, and they're less, Beaker and Bunsen burner related. So you kind of have to go through that Beaker Bunsen burner side of things to get to the job that you want. But I will say, some of the hardest parts in the career are getting to the career itself. So I'm not minimizing in any which way how difficult it can be. I would encourage people to learn how to study and get through that part of it. But the healthcare field is very much not learning the science in classrooms. It's much more applicable to things that are probably interested in.
Mhm.
And you get closer to that the closer you get to your job. So you have to learn fundamental things, and you might be like, I don't understand why I need to learn these fundamental things. It's because you need to build off of that kind of stuff. So I don't want to say it gets easier in the fact that the classes are less challenging. They're still challenging, but your interest level in it is higher, so you don't mind learning, if that helps.
If I could add, this is Tiffany from Pine Rest. There is not that much science in some of these healthcare fields, specifically social work, psychology. Yes, you might have to take 101 biology, but that's about all I had to take. And I have a master's degree in a clinical director. So there is hope for people that want to be in the healthcare field that are not good at science. I am not one of those people. I would like to add just real quickly, in regards to getting kids started early in the field. In college, I try and tell people, I know TJ Maxx or somebody else might have a good discount, but get in the field early. Because when I start to look at people, if they have a master's degree because they went to school from 9th grade to 25 years old, but they have no work experience, I can't hire them. I need both. And so at Pine Rest specifically, we have OTs, ATs, speech therapists, nurses, lots of nurses, and they start out as psych techs. in college. So they're working on their nursing degree, they're working on their teaching degrees, they're working on their social work degrees, OTs, ATs, but they're getting hospital experience and they're around all disciplines, doctors, nurses, social workers, activity therapists, occupational therapists. So just want to keep that in mind, that not that TJ Maxx or the mall isn't a great place to work, but it is that work experience while you're getting your degree is essential, in my opinion. So, and like I said, hope for the people that are not good at science, there are fields in healthcare. So take care all. Have a
I
great
agree.
day.
Thank you,
Thank
Tiffany.
you. Yeah, and I think one thing I will add, and Andrew, I want to give you time to answer that question too, is the appeal to the career in healthcare about the setting or about the particular role, right? And so if it's about the setting, then what are the roles within those settings that wouldn't require the clinical? And then if it's the clinical, how do we get you motivated for that science class? But Andrew, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to chime in, I want to give you a chance to.
Yeah, I think science is a good idea to know the whys and the, so it wasn't just like somebody explained something to you and you'd say, well, I was never taught that. They give you the whole thing like, I administer medications that affects the Krebs cycle, but I couldn't maybe draw out the Krebs cycle at this point in time, or I've never had somebody asked me to draw the chemical structure of, photosynthesis. That's, it's just ridiculous thing that you would not really want to learn. But guess what? Maybe if you wanted to work in a lab, maybe work, I know people in healthcare that have gone work in work for Pfizer, and maybe they're working with bioengineering, but you wouldn't go to that field by accident. You would enjoy doing that, and then you would transfer to that role. So yeah, it's important to know the ins and outs, but like I said, for science, I mean, it's also when you work in that career field, in that clinical, it kind of makes more sense. You might learn a disease process and go, I'll never understand this until you see somebody, old Joey at the hospital, you take care of him for a week, and it's like, wow, I really understand like Barrett's esophagitis or something, so it's easier to learn versus reading it out of a book.
Now, several of you mentioned the need for good study skills. And I think that's definitely something high schoolers are lacking no matter which area they go into.
Yes, deep sigh there. I think we have time for one more question. Is there anyone else who'd either like to come off mute or drop it in the chat? Any questions? I'm giving my best counselor pause there. So I will note folks have dropped their contact information in the chat. We will also make sure to share it. And there's a good reminder that you can still build those study skills. Tutoring is always available. There's lots of folks. I would just echo back something Eric said at the beginning around the power of family and friends and connections that are out there. You never know who may have a skill that then sparks the interest for a student in that kind of way. So I want to give a big round of applause for Andrew, who's still with us, Angie and Doug as well. And if you have follow-up questions, we will get contact information. You can also always reach out to myself or Samantha Jackson as well. So thank you, Angie, Doug, Andrew, thank you so much. And have a great rest of your morning. I am going to turn it over to Samantha, whose name and whose computer this is at this moment.
All right. Yes, great. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you. I don't know if y'all saw it, and Amy put some videos in the chat as well. So definitely check those out. All right. Thank you. So we are going to take just a minute to do some debrief and discussion now. Thank you so much, Angie, Doug, Andrew, Eric. All right. So we're going to just spend about 8 minutes or so in some breakout groups just for you to get a chance to kind of like decompress. Like that was a lot of information. Again, like Catherine said, this was really just meant to show kind of the variety of different pathways that are available. It's not all just, you know, going to be a doctor or even a nurse. You know, there are tons of different options available. Oh, let me share my screen here again. If I can find my screen, where is it? But we're going to be moving into some small groups, and we're going to be, again, kind of debriefing about what we just heard. Okay, should work now. All right. So in your small group, we just want you to share one of the following. Share something you learned, something that surprised you, or something you want to continue exploring. And go ahead and just drop an emoji in the chat that captures how you're feeling after this panel. Oops. All right, so I'm going to open up some breakout rooms now. Like I said, just going to send you for probably about 8 minutes or so. 4. All right, I'm gonna go open those up. And again, just sharing something with your group about something you learned, something that surprised you, or something you want to continue exploring. We're gonna go ahead and open those up for just about 8 minutes.